events because the point that I really want to drive home with the purpose of this specific call is, again, guys, if we go back to decoding events and not dates, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that based on our history of studying the Q plan, almost every single date, and depending on which calendar you're going by, has some kind of significance in history, right? I don't think there's a single date that you can go and look at the calendar and go, oh, across thousands of years, there has not been one historically significant thing that's happened on this day. And there are certain days where you have many significant things that have happened, right? So these are patterns that we put together. But the reason why that's actually totally irrelevant is because, again, guys, we're trying to put the cart before the horse. You have to have the event first. And so what the white hats are doing is they're like what Nick was talking about earlier, right? You're anticipating the events based on things that you need to check off of your list. And once you have that next thingy that you want to check off the list, then they apply that to a date. So how is it possible to apply it to a date before you know what the event is going to be? That's why it's in cyclical looping patterns. And what I can tell you guys is, based on my conversation with a lot of these white hat developers, actually, let me go backwards. The reason why I have done exclusive deep dives into Stellar is because I was just like everybody else. And Jason will know this because we were doing decodes together long before I ever came into Stellar, right? We were looking at the whole Q plan and all the different facets of it. And where did the election thing go? And what about the COVID thing over here? And what about, this and that and the trafficking? There are too many rabbit holes. And when I finally understood that Stellar was a massive part, I thought it was a massive part of the QFS. And it was over time that I debunked my own narrative going, whoa, it's not just the QFS, it's actually the keystone of the QFS. Oh, it's not just the keystone of the QFS, it's the keystone of the freaking Q plan. Oh, it's not just the keystone of the freaking Q plan, it's literally the keystone of the entire plan. It's the universal quantum plan. And I know that's a really big statement, but the more people understand what Stellar brings to the table, the more they will agree that this is way bigger than just a small human plan. This is a big universal intergalactic plan that's happening before us. And so, when Jason mentioned the word haiku earlier, it makes me chuckle because, again, guys, I was part of that group that said, okay, we've got to look at every single Q post and how does that align with all the different comms that are coming out in the articles without the understanding of the centerpiece being Stellar. So when you understand that Stellar is the keystone, it puts everything else into perspective. And that's why we keep talking about you cannot have a black swan market crash unless you have a safety net. What is your safety net? Well, it's Stellar. We've already proven that. We did that on a call with Jason and Nick and Susanna, on top of 10,000 other calls that we've done in the past before. So if you know all this stuff cannot happen without Stellar being ready, why do you care what all the other dates and all the other rabbit holes are doing? Because they're just distractions. They're just more haikus for people to go and use almost like busy work, right? And I mentioned this analogy before, I think maybe with Jaren's call, but it reminds me of a very, very famous video on YouTube of a dog competition where they had, I think it was like a golden retriever or something like that, where it's like the dog had to get from this line, like the starting line, to the end line over here, but they put all these bowls on the side of the ramp, and they had, like, some of them had treats, some of them had squeaky toys, and the whole goal was to get the dog straight line down to its owner. I'm sure you guys have probably seen this video, and if you haven't, then I'll have to go and find and post it. But this dog totally got sidetracked, and it went for every single treat in every single bowl and played with all the different squeaky toys and was like, oh, I missed a squeaky toy. I got to go back to this bowl before I can go to this bowl. That's what's happening with the plan. So many people are getting so sidetracked with every little thing that hits the news without understanding that that's part of the PSYOP. That is a disinformation narrative. That is a misinformation narrative. No, you're following a black hat sleeper agent over there. Why are you doing that? Just wake up. If you see the bigger picture, you won't fall for these things. You won't fall for the false hopium. And like even to this day, even just a couple minutes ago, there are still other truthers, other channels out there going, oh, well, the ISO officially kicks off in 6 days because, MEPS is when it officially announces. No, that's not how it works, guys. How do I know this? I'll give another example. We go back to Nick's checklist, things that we have to anticipate before the big flip happens. It's more than just MEPS. It's more than just this. It's more than just PBFT, right? I talked about PBFT for a whole year now. And then a couple of weeks ago, I found out PBFT isn't even the big thing that we're waiting for. We're waiting for a whole series of really big things, right? We mentioned SEP 40. If you haven't learned about SEP 40, that is in QSI, it's known as the stellar French onion soup, if you've heard of that term before. But if you're not in QSI and you've never heard of the French onion soup, SEP 40 is the protocol that's getting baked into Stellar, right? SEP stands for Stellar Ecosystem Protocol, which forms the backbone of regulation. And it's not just crypto regulation, it's quantum regulation. So obviously that has to happen. Obviously, Bretton Woods 3 has to happen publicly, right? We know